Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are and whenever you're watching this. My name is Will Figueroa, and I'm super humble and proud and honored to be hosting yet another episode of Tiger's Den Live with the man behind it all who created the Tiger framework, the Tiger's mindset, so that you too can stop clawing your way, scratching through, and truly clawing your way towards success. Paul Routhier joins us from wherever he is in the world. Sometimes he's on the West Coast. One day he'll be in Europe. We never know where Paul is these days, but I'm sure glad and proud and happy that he's with us this week. How are you, Paul? Good morning.
Good morning. I'm hailing from Minnesota today, so I'm right in the middle.
We're at home base. Home base.
Home base. The horse picture. Cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Love it. Well, like we do every time we meet, we're going to dive into the Tiger's framework. Well, what is, if you don't remember, what is Tiger, right? Tiger is tenacity, inspire, generosity, right? We're talking about execution and rejuvenation. Today, we're going to really dive deep into inspiration. And I'm going to start off this morning. I'm a little bummed out, and I'll tell you why. Because about 20 minutes east of me, we had the Artemis shuttle scrubbed. This is the first time that we're going to the moon again, the US. So this is NASA. This isn't SpaceX. This isn't a private entity. This is, us as a government, the USA, going to the moon with the Artemis project. And it's always sad because of weather, right? It's always something. It's always what seemingly seems trivial, right? It could be weather. It could be, they have all of these checklists, right? And that in and of itself, to me, is inspiring. And there's the the mascot for the Tigers Den.
Wow. What's that called? Stealing the shot?
No, that's called loyalty, my friend. That's called loyalty. That in and of itself is inspiring, right? But
that's funny.
I digress. What inspires me, and we've spoken about this in previous episodes, is technology, is innovation, is quite frankly the human spirit to keep going. And this morning I was super pumped. My days start around 4 a.m., 4:30 here on the East Coast. I'll work out, I'll come back, I kind of get into my groove. And I started with the NASA radio in the background today, and they're going through the checklist, and we're good to go, clear to go, good to go, and then you hear bang, bang, bang. It's like, oh man, how do we ensure that we're not just going through the motions? How do we ensure that we are injecting what inspires us? There's so many people out there that do so many great things, just like they're doing at NASA, where, I'm here in Orlando. They're 20 minutes away from here. How do we ensure that what we do is injecting the mission, injecting the goal when things aren't, going well? Like today, they had to scrub the mission. We won't have that mission again. I think it's Friday. So Friday, the first few days in September. How do I ensure that as I continue to tenaciously proceed, right? Go where no man has gone before, kind of thing, right? How do I ensure that as I tenaciously step forward, how do I make sure that I'm injecting the right things? And what are those things to inject in order to stay inspired?
Wow, the right stuff. It's great that you brought up. It's great that. Oh my God, it's great that you brought up NASA. NASA is like, I know you're a Star Wars fan. I'm a Star Wars fan.
In both sides, by the way. Star Trek, anything with space, for sure.
Yeah. So I was a young kid back in the 70s, right? And that's what I watched. It was, Star Trek. It was way before Star Wars was even a thought.
Right.
And then the missions, man. All the missions. I was knee deep into it. You talk about inspired people, in NASA. Any of the space agencies, even the Russian space agency back in that day.
It was right, absolutely.
So it was a combination of two things. NASA, from a NASA standpoint, it was a comment. I know this because I've read all, everything there is to on NASA. Not to mention watching. I think I seen 80% of the launches ever. I've been to SpaceX down in South Texas. So
Nice.
I'm still really kind of into it because my wife my wife asked me, "What do you want me to do? When you die, get me ashes and shoot me up." I want to go. Um,
Uh,
I want to at least say I can go. So
yeah.
they're the most inspired people for two reasons. Number one, they're
Mm,
doing things no one has ever done before, right? We
mm.
talk, you hear Tony Robbins talk about the moonshot. That's literally the moonshot. That's
Right.
what everybody is referencing, right?
Right.
Um, so, and the other thing is competition, right?
Mm,
So if you think about NASA in the early days, and honestly still today, it was about a competition to be the first to do it, right?
right.
It was national pride. It wasn't just NASA that was inspired; it was the entire country
Mm,
because the goal was so outrageous, so undoable. I mean, there's still conspiracy theories today that they didn't actually do it. They filmed it, right?
right. Right. Right.
And the world's flat, but
Right. 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 Right.
but it's really inspiration and competition, and the size of the goal,
Mm,
and and measuring yourself against other people that are trying to get there.
mm.
Those are two things that really can, really inspire you to keep rocking and rolling. We grew up in high school. Hopefully, we played team sports in high school. Maybe we played team sports in college, and learning from coaches to wrap the team around a goal and create cohesion of the team, and keep them inspired to, a national championship, state championship, regional championship, whatever it may be. But the biggest thing that you can do to keep inspired is keep your eye on the ball. What is that goal? I mean, and we talk about that, about writing your goal every morning and doing those things. Um, that keeps an eye on it, but also expanding that. Who else is going for that goal? I got to beat. Can I beat somebody to that goal? Because they're in the same game as a company. I mean, competition is definitely a major piece of organizations and what they're striving to be and do.
Yeah. One of the things that I think of, especially with everything going on just 20 minutes from here, uh, are the failures, right? How many,
Oh,
how many rockets have gone up that have just absolutely, exploded? How many times did Elon have to just, by the fourth time he launched with specifically with SpaceX, he was on his last pennies. It wasn't until that last launch at that last, that finally NASA came in and said, "Hey, we want to give you it's like $1 billion grant or something." And the story goes that he screamed, "I love you,"
yeah,
However, with that being said, oftentimes, especially if you're leading an organization, and with those kinds of failures, right? National spotlight, global spotlight, in arguably some of the best minds possible, you have to inject a few things, right? Especially if you're Elon, right? And today we hear about conversations he's had about being multiplanetary and having this big dream and this vision, but in the midst of it, you're just kind of going for it, right? What can I inject, right? Say I'm a leader in a bigger organization, or we're really trying, and maybe we failed, or we're just not there yet, or the milestone ends up being a bigger stretch than what we thought. What can I inject in my team in order to keep the inspiration going? Not motivation, not fuel for discipline, true inspiration. How can we keep the inspiration going if we're really tired, if we're really going for it, and it still seems just too far?
knowledge is power, baby. You mentioned it's great that you mentioned Elon because Elon's probably the best example of this.
Yeah.
And when I was down at SpaceX, um, it was like the day after one of the rockets had crashed, had
Um,
blew up, and we got there, and there's a literal pile of rocket rubble,
oh,
bent and burnt and sheet
that
and
had to be heartbreaking to see.
well, it wasn't. It was actually inspiring
Oh,
because the thing was that the way I was thinking about it was like, look at this guy, look at these failures. I mean, how many failures have I had in my life? And I've been a burnt piece of rubble, and then I got back up and put myself back together, and went back to town. And to see that damage, and right next to it, and the rocket assembly plant's about a mile away from the launch platform, and to see them building the other rocket, there were like engineers all over the place, guys up on lifts. They're putting this next rocket together, and they're just still going and going and going.
mm,
And and that's where I say knowledge is power, because they learned from that rocket crash. They took the data from that rocket crash, and now they're making adjustments in the next rocket. Elon's a great example. I mean, Elon's not a rocket scientist. A lot of people think he is, but he's not.
right,
Okay, Elon's a self-made rocket scientist. He didn't
right,
go to
right,
school for this.
right,
Elon reads thousands of books. I mean,
right.
that's all he does, and he literally taught himself to support this goal on doing that. So feeding yourself with knowledge is the way to keep inspired. Feeding
Oh, interesting.
feeding your team with knowledge, and gaining uh, and giving them the benefit of the experience that you've had in your failures, so that they can win. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what failure is all about. I when I was young, I would hide failure. I'd like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed.
Oh, for sure.
I'd walk around with my head hanging. Oh man, I screwed that up. Uh, uh, and it's different now. Like I talk about them. I'm like, this is what I learned from these failures, because failure is just your next step to success. It's just part of that process. And keeping yourself educated, um, learning from other people's mistakes by reading, it all builds you up to get ready for that success. There's a lot of people. There's a few people out there who've had instant success, and
Sure.
they've never experienced failure. But there's very few. Every Elon's experienced failures, multiple failures, burnt rockets, burnt
Right.
burnt rockets on the ground, billions. I mean, he's worth 400, 500 billion dollars, but he's lost 4 to 5 times that to
Right.
get there. And it's people have to realize that you have to make the investment in yourself to keep inspired. You have to invest in your team, if you have one, to keep them inspired. And that investment is your experience, and pointing them to the knowledge that they need to be successful.
So what I'm hearing is don't hide the failures, but when it comes to your team, promote the knowledge from those failures. Is this where innovation comes from? Is this where
Uh,
is this where that inspired thinking comes from because we have this knowledge?
well, innovation really comes from having a good plan.
Mm,
When you have a good plan, you understand your goal, and you run into a roadblock, then you have to innovate, because you don't stop going at the goal. You have to go after it a different way. Innovation comes from difficulty, right? It's at the precipice of difficulty, of not being able to overcome a problem, that innovation kicks in, inspiration and innovation.
mm.
And that's the tenacity of moving forward, because you won't get there if you just give up because you have a block. And the innovation comes from the combination of tenacity and inspiration.
So what are some things that I could look into? What are some things that I can identify in order to be able to innovate? Right. So case in point, let's go back to Elon. Let's go back to SpaceX, or even the rocket launch today. Right. What are some of the things that I could identify in order to continue to inspire my team, in order to continue to give that knowledge either of successes and failures? what are some things that I need to identify so that I can innovate?
Well, very specific to your team, right?
Mm,
So what's your plan? What's your goal? What do you need to accomplish? Have you worked it back to having a tactical plan, right? And as you're implementing your technical plan and you run into, oh, we can't do it that way, that's going to create the situation in which you can wrap your team around the problem and begin to be innovative to work around that problem. And it's very specific to what you're doing, what your plan is, what your goal is, um, and what you're running into as problems, right? Innovation comes from struggle. Innovation comes from a couple of different things. When we're talking about innovation with invention, it's seeing a problem that that you feel that you can fix for society. If you're doing an invention, you see a problem, you're going to innovate and create something to fix that problem. Innovation is a reaction to a problem, right? To something. You don't need to innovate if everything's going perfectly and you're all the sales are up and
right.
everything's perfect, right?
Rockets are launching, they're landing
Rockets are
accurate.
launching, everything's working perfectly as planned. There's really no inspiration to innovate
Mm.
there. It's when you run into difficulties or when you find problems that you need to overcome or sidestep that you start to innovate.
So how do you avoid innovating just for innovation's sake, right? Like how do you identify finding the right problems and then finding solutions for problems that are later, right? Because you don't want to spend resources, right? You want to be innovative. And I'm sure many organizations have research and development organizations within their bigger organization. How do you find that balance in a big organization so that you're spending the right resources on the right problems versus finding, creating solutions that maybe the problems don't even exist yet or ever?
Yeah. Well, most large organizations, at least I hope they are analyzing their processes,
Mm,
at least quarterly, because a problem, we can shift from problem thought to effective thought, efficiency, right? How efficient are we in our organization? And that's a constant state of improvement, right? So you find new technologies come out, right? That could improve your efficiency. So then you're starting to innovate around your processes. If there's not a steel wall, you can't put in a process and go on that process for 20 years and still think it's like the most efficient way to do things. Okay,
right.
there's too much innovation in the industry where people who are out there looking at problems from a different perspective
Yeah.
are innovating with their software and doing that type of stuff. So really, from that standpoint, you analyze your processes. I don't see a lot of companies or a lot of people just innovating to innovate.
Mm,
They're seeing a problem out there. The real question is it a problem that truly creates inefficiency, or is it just kind of a hump in the road, right? And what's the cost benefit, right? So
right.
what's the cost of innovating versus the benefit at the end of the day of that innovation, right? So if that's going to create an efficiency that tagged up and stacked up is going to save the company millions of dollars, or it's an invention that is going to create millions of dollars in revenue, and it's only going to cost $50,000-$60,000 to do it. Well, that equation naturally works itself out, and that can scale, right?
Right.
um, and that's a natural thing. But you might run into a problem that in fact, I just talked to someone last week about that. A problem that was going to cost $300,000 to sell, and overall, the impact was going to be like $100,000.
Wow.
So it's like, okay, so that's not one we're going to deal with. We're gonna do whatever we do just to step over that and continue moving on, because there's no long-term benefit to fixing that issue. Now, that issue may be fixed when we fix a different issue that's more impactful, and we'll see how those two align, and we'll come back to it when it makes sense.
Yeah, it's so counterculture, right? Because what you're talking about, what I'm hearing is not just hiding the problems, but really putting it out there, analyzing the problems, and then going through each one and saying, "Hey, if we fix this, what is the impact, and which one is going to be more multiplicative in its impact? Is it going to help us? Is it going to help the community, the region? Maybe it's just the department. Is it the whole organization?" It's so counterculture to put the problems up on a board and go, "Yep, hey everyone, we have problems A through Z.
Yeah.
let's pick one and let's see how far we can go, and we'll see if it's worth our while." That is so counterculture to go into the problem and identify it, and that to me is what is inspiring, right? Is the person who's in the boardroom or in the meeting or in the room that goes, whoa, wait a minute. Is this really going to help us? Having someone who's present of mind, who has the tiger framework, who has the tiger mindset to go, whoa, wait a minute. Are we really executing on this? And if we are, then what are we putting in place in order to have a multiplicative impact, whether it's on our bottom line, or whether it's for rejuvenation for our people? That to me is super, super inspiring. Is there a company out there or an individual that you've experienced that is definitely someone to model after? Is there maybe a leader that you've had, or a manager, or just someone in your life that you're like, oh man, like this person knew exactly how to identify the problem and be able to fix it, and it had a multiplicative impact?
There's actually a very inspiring line in a movie that I saw a long time ago, um, and it was about the Mossad, and the Mossad has and this Israeli intelligence, right?
Ah,
They call it the 11th man. If
that's cool.
so, like if all the 11 decision makers, if all the decision makers come to the same conclusion, the 11th man by policy has to take the opposite side and research the most,
Oh,
right? So
like double.
it's yeah, I've seen it in companies, but the really the thought pattern behind that is really explicit, is really ex, explanation. I mean, it's a really
Yeah,
good explanation. It's just someone to really play devil's advocate. There's got to be someone, and it keeps you out of groupthink, and really take the opposite side so it can be well researched and argued out. And that makes for a really an outstanding process.
yeah, yeah. I think for me, there's been so many people in my life, and we've spoken previously in other episodes in regards to the the different father figures in my life, and uh, the one person that's coming up in the moment, his name is Scott Schneider. He was actually my high school English teacher, and he very quickly identified me as someone who really wanted to succeed, and I was struggling. I it was very hard for me to be a part of a traditional academic system. I definitely do not thrive in traditional academia for sure. And Scott Schneider, I give him credit for this for sure. Scott Schneider is really the one who taught me how to read. Truly, truly taught me how to read. And I'll never forget the book. The book was Fahrenheit 451. And that in and of itself is a hardcore, futuristic, right? And and I was really struggling, but I made it a point, and I remember this. I remember this so vividly. I remember day one, week one of school, sitting down in class, and I had asked him. I said, "Hey, like, I know that you have us either like in alphabetical order, or he had kind of his reasoning for his madness, if you will, right? A method to his madness." And I asked him specifically. I said, "I need to be in front. I have to be able. I can't have people in front of me because I know that it's a distraction. I need to be in front." And I think that was something for him that really stood out and was like he knows his weakness. Like even as a high school
Mhm.
kid, I'm what 15, 16 years old in high school, and and I remember very specifically saying, "I got to be in front. The kids in front, they could be perfect kids. They could be angels. I cannot have them in front of me. I need to be in front. I need you there. I need to see the authority. I need you to capture my attention. And that's just half my battle. The other half is actually executing against the content. And as I'm going through the content, and as I'm reading through the book, like you could, like my hand is on my head, it's like, oh man, like I am just, and I'll never forget. We're supposed to do a report, and like any high school student, right? You pull the report from something else, he copy, and he caught me, He instantly identified what was his genius, and what continues to inspire me is that he saw what I copied, because it wasn't necessarily everything. There were very specific points to the things that I genuinely just didn't understand. And I knew that the assignment was just fill it out, right? He understood that I was just kind of going through the system, but he wanted more for me. And that's why that was really inspiring for me, was that he genuinely wanted more from me. He saw something in me that I could then take and inject in my own life so that I could continue. And I think that's the core of what inspiration is, right? It's to be able to pass it on. It's to be able to share that idea. And so what he ended up doing was he took me to the side, and he knew that my dad in high school was really kind of involved. And so he took me to the side and he said, "Hey, dude, like, I know where you pulled this from. I know the website. I even know like the page numbers of where you pulled this from." Like, oh man, And he said to me something I'll never forget. He goes, "If I show this to your father, how do you think he would feel?" And that crushed me, crushed me. And I said, "Yeah, you know what? He'd be really disappointed." I said, "But it's hard and it's not easy. And I do want to be successful. I just didn't know another way to be able to complete the assignment." And that's when he introduced me to audiobooks. And he said, "I want you to take this." And it was an old cassette tape. And he gave me the player and everything. And he gave me the cassette tape, he gave me the player, and he said, "I want you to go back. I want you to do this assignment again. And I want you to start having a conversation with the book. Start having a conversation with the author and start asking questions. And we'll discuss them in class." And I thought, wow, this is weird. Like, this is like kind of far out. Like, it was almost like woo woo to me, right? It's like conversing with the book. Like, what the heck? What am I doing? And it was a brilliant move, because I remember sitting at my desk in my home in New York, putting this tape, this cassette in, and it's, you could hear the you could hear the magnet, you know. And as the author is reading it, or I guess the publishing company is reading the book, the voice artist is reading the book, there were questions, and it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. And I go, yeah, why does he, hold the fire hose that way? And why is he a fireman? And why does he, to this day, Fahrenheit 451 is still a very politically driven book. However, going back and having these questions, I'll never forget this girl that I had a crush on looked at me from the side and was like, "How did you even think to ask that question?" And now you feel cool, right? It's like, oh yeah, And it allowed for me to have, and this goes right back to your point, right? Knowledge. I understood the problem. I just didn't know the path. And I think that's what's most inspiring to a lot of people, is that, especially those in leadership, Elon Musk, the greats, right? Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, the list goes on and on and on. There's a bunch of men and women in history that are absolutely inspiring. I think what allows for them to have such an exponential impact is that they have a purview. They have a vision of just beyond the goal, just beyond what people think is possible. There's a great chapter in the Steve Jobs biography where he is absolutely livid. They're building the Lisa. This is years before the iPad. And he's building the Lisa, and he's like, "This is not good enough. Like, why don't you understand? It needs to be thinner. It needs to be more like," and what he was talking about ultimately was the iPad, but there was a limitation on the technology at that time. But he had such a purview. He had such a vision for the future. That to me is inspiring. Are those people who not only are able to see the trees, but be able to see the forest at the same time, you know? And that to me has always been amazing. Do you have any examples of anyone else who not only has the vision, be far and beyond, but was also able to get into the details as well? And what was it that you learned, and was it that you took away from that?
There's a lot of people that I've looked at over the years, but somebody who's more recently inspiring to me, I guess, because as I read and I go through people, I look at, but most recently, Howard Schultz, who is the CEO of Starbucks Coffee.
Sure, Starbucks. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I recently watched a series on him, and have read about him and his vision for Starbucks initially, but how he really failed at first, when they opened up in China. I mean, it was a complete failure. They had two executives they put in China, 10 years of complete failure.
Right.
And he still didn't give up. I mean, 10 years on that market, and didn't give up. And then he innovated, and then he put someone in charge in China, and they changed the way they, very specifically, the Chinese culture is all about family and the family unit. And what they didn't get was the parents of the employees' involvement,
Mm.
to get buy-in in the company. And I think I mentioned this a couple of episodes ago,
Yes,
but
yes. We're
they
talking about
did they
execution, I
yeah,
believe.
exactly. And what he they did was they had an employee kickoff meeting, and they do this once a year now, but they didn't invite the employees, they invited the employees' parents.
Yeah.
And they started talking about how they were going to take care of the employees. And it literally, the company went viral in China after that. And now China is one of their most successful arenas, but they failed for 10 years because they didn't understand the culture. And the way he approached that, and the way he didn't give up, and the way he innovated was inspiring
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
How
So,
do you want to go for the Hail Mary, Paul? You know, there's some real creative thinking, you know, and there are problems. I mean, there's a list of problems around the world, right? How do you how do you go for that Hail Mary? If I'm in an organization, and I mean, even let's go back to SpaceX, Elon Musk, right? It's like, all right, guys, this is the last space, you know, this is the last launch. After this, you know, we got to go. We got to clean up shop, right? How, how do you know when to say, yeah, you know what? Let's just do it. Is it
so
when your back is against the wall,
I,
or
I,
you know what I mean? How do you where do you when do you know it's time for some really kind of out there thinking in order to innovate on a solution towards a problem?
Well, I think there's a different step to that.
Okay.
So, like, Howard Schultz had a vision. All right. Elon Musk had a vision. Those two gentlemen will be in their grave before their vision is accomplished.
Sure, sure, sure,
It's
sure.
it's 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 you mentioned that, like, Elon Musk. When's the last? There never will be. He will find a way to get it done. Okay, you're talking about a person who will accomplish, or he will set in motion systems and people to accomplish what he envisions. Um, and that's really it. And that goes from a company vision standpoint to a
Yeah.
personal vision standpoint. If you don't have a vision of you, just you, what you look like in 20 years, if you don't have that vision, then you can't work to it, right? You have to envision yourself as something, as what you're going to be, who you're going to be, what you're going to do, what you're going to accomplish, what you want people to say about you at your funeral.
Mm,
That's where
mm,
I go from. What do I want people to say about me at my funeral,
wow.
right? And that's more about who I am, right?
Right.
Than what my vision is that I'm going to accomplish. It's I've changed a lot of things over the past few years, and one of the major, and that's when I started be thinking about what would people say about me if I was gone at this particular point. and I didn't like what I thought people would say about me.
Yeah.
So I changed that. What do I want them to say about me? And that's more about how I treat people and how I include people in my life. Whereas from a company vision or from a household vision, what do I want my household to look like in 20 years? What do I want my daughter to look like in 20 years? How do I want my relationship with my wife and where we are financially in 20 years? And that vision's burned into my brain, right?
Mm.
So I get up every morning with that vision that goes along with writing my goals every day and moving forward. And I will find a way to make it happen, one way or the other. And I will be innovative and make changes in my direction to get to that goal. But it's that inspiration comes from vision, and we all have visions.
Sure.
It's just some of us don't put the time in to really build that vision out to see what it really looks like, and then get a plan, build a plan to get there. And that's really what it is. You have to have a vision for yourself.
So do you think that these visionaries, those who really have an understanding of the future, and those who inspire, is the community impact secondary or tertiary? Are they, or and they're just thinking about their own vision, or themselves, or are they locking themselves in? Are they locking that vision in of themselves and then going to the second and third impact?
Well, again, that depends on the person. We'll go back to Howard Schultz at Starbucks, and his vision was to create a company that was about the people
Yeah.
that work there. His policies show that. So his vision isn't just for himself; it is a community vision, um, and he has worked towards that every day that Starbucks has been open. So, I mean, really, true vision. Elon Musk is about his vision isn't about Elon Musk. A lot of people will say that it's not true. It's about us as a world growing together and
Yeah.
becoming one. His vision is going beyond, be to Mars, but look at the underlying things that he's doing. He is 100% socially. He's trying to build a better society. It is who he is, um, and so it's encompassing. The true visionaries are encompassing of the people as opposed to the vision. I mean, the vision gives people a place to go. People need that. People need a place to go, right? They need to be pointed at something.
Is it up to the leader to create that place? Is it up to us to create that place? Does the place already exist? What is that? What is that place? Is it just reaching the goal? Is that what that is? Or is there something? Is it more tangible than that? Right? Is the place the business itself? Right? Is it my home? Is it the business that I work? Is it the enterprise that I'm leading? Or is that place something else?
So we always talk about in companies, we talk about people who fit and people who don't fit,
Mm.
right? So I mean, we talk about hiring and that, and it's a really deep subject, and people just, oh, I like this person. It isn't. It's about company culture, right? So the company culture needs to fit, and the people build the culture of that company. So it's a bunch of like-minded people working towards a single goal. And that's really when you get the good mix. It's an ethereal thing, right? Um, Company vision, individual vision, they all align in a properly formed company that's
Yeah.
working towards something. Um, so I think it's a lot of understanding who you are, and working with a company that fits who you are. Then you're all working towards the same thing, right?
Yeah. Love it. Love it. I'm conscious of the time. I see the clock. If and I'm always going to end on this, right? We've spoken about a lot. We've spoken about a lot of inspiring things. We've spoken about how to be inspiring, what others are doing in order to inject inspiration, in order to continue to really live and breathe the Tiger mindset using the Tiger framework. If no one else remembers anything else from today's session, Paul, what should they be walking away with?
I think they should be walking away with starting to look at what your vision is. What is your vision for yourself? And how does that fit into where you're going now? And do you need to make changes so that you can get there?
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much for being here, Paul. Always. If you too are looking for inspiration, if you're looking to find the tenacity in yourself or in your own business, if you have a major enterprise, you have to go over to Cleveland Rain. Head on over to clevelandrain.com, book some time with Paul. He will absolutely inject some real inspiration into your organization. Him and his team are phenomenal. Book some time, get to know him, and put some action into it, right? Because that's what inspiration is. Inspiration isn't just this feel good, it's people who take action. So take action today. Take the notes, put it into action, and an easy, low-hanging piece of fruit that you can grab today is booking some time with Paul and his team over at clevelandrain.com. Paul, as always, thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Will.